Chapter 1 After the end of the world, I was reborn. You are listening at novelfull.audio. It hurt, damn it, it hurt too much. An unforgettable pain ripped through Zhang Yi. It wasn't just a feeling, it was brutal reality. He was being torn apart by the very people he trusted and helped, his neighbors and so-called friends. In this end-of-the-world scenario, where supplies were almost non-existent, they ignored his past generosity and were hacking him to pieces. As he lay dying, he saw Fang Yuqing, the woman he'd always idealized, standing behind the mob, looking pitiful. But then she shouted, "I told him to open the door. You gotta leave me a rib or two for soup." She'd been the one who tricked him into opening the door, sealing his fate. Zhang Yi stared at her, his eyes burning with hatred and regret. He had only himself to blame for being so stupid and kind, ending up as somebody else's meal in this new world. He wished he could start over. Next time, he wouldn't show mercy to anyone. He'd only look out for himself. Darkness enveloped Zhang Yi, and he lost consciousness. But then, he gasped awake, bolting upright on the sofa. The hellish scene he'd just experienced, the agonizing pain, was still searingly fresh in his mind. He panted, sweat soaking his clothes. What the hell? Wasn't I just killed by those animal neighbors? As his head cleared, he took in his surroundings. He recognized the place, his own apartment. The comfortable temperature surprised him. Back in December 2050, the year the world ended, Earth had been hit by a supernova explosion, triggering a cataclysmic storm. Global temperatures had plummeted. In Zhang Yi's city, it was a constant -40 to -60 degrees Fahrenheit. Blizzards had raged for a month, burying the entire city. Reports said that in northern China, temperatures had reached a terrifying -148 degrees Fahrenheit, with the whole planet encased in ice and snow. Mass extinctions had occurred, and even humans had suffered devastating losses. With over 90% of the population wiped out, Zhang Yi stood up, grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge, and gulped down most of it. Even though the water was ice cold, it felt like liquid gold. During the apocalypse, people risked freezing to death just to dig up snow and melt it for water. He grabbed his phone and checked the date. November 11th. Still a whole month before the end. Looks like I've been reborn. Zhang Yi took a deep breath and quickly understood what had happened. That last month hadn't been a dream, especially the pain of being ripped apart. It had been too real. Relief washed over him. He was incredibly lucky, and a cold fury sparked in his eyes. He remembered exactly who had killed him. This time, he would survive, and he wouldn't show those bastards any mercy. He began to think about how to prepare for the coming apocalypse. His parents were gone, leaving him their house, a 1,300 square foot place in the city. He also had over 2 million in the bank, which normally would be more than enough. But with the end of the world approaching, supplies would run out fast. That amount of money wouldn't last long. To survive alone, he'd need a mountain of supplies, and Zhang Yi didn't just want to survive, he wanted to live comfortably. He'd need food, entertainment, otherwise, he'd go crazy. Suddenly, a beam of white light appeared in front of him. Thinking his eyes were playing tricks, he rubbed them. Then, a strange thought popped into his head. It felt like the light was part of him, and information about it flooded his mind. He focused on the light, and his consciousness instantly entered it. He found himself in a vast, white, empty space. It was impossibly huge, a blank canvas stretching in every direction. This is another dimension. Guess I got some superpowers along with my rebirth. Zhang Yi felt a surge of excitement. The gamma rays must have given him special abilities. With this huge space, storing supplies for the apocalypse would be a lot easier. He wanted to know the limits of the space, how much it could hold, and if there were restrictions on what he could store. He returned to his room in his mind and started trying to move things into the space. He started with small things like teacups and bowls, and they vanished easily. Then, he tried moving the larger appliances, TV, refrigerator, washing machine, computer, air conditioner, vacuum cleaner. The space accepted everything without resistance, and with a thought, Zhang Yi could pull things back out. He was ecstatic. With this space, I can stockpile a freaking fortune. He licked his lips, a bold plan forming in his mind. Zhang Yi was a warehouse supervisor at Walmart. As the world's largest supermarket chain, Walmart had everything. It had 3 huge warehouses, and the stock in those warehouses could supply several cities for a week. If Zhang Yi could empty out one of those warehouses and transport everything to his space, he'd be set for life. And the best part? Walmart only stocked top-quality stuff, name-brand food, high-end department store items, even luxury goods. If he could empty a Walmart warehouse, he'd live like a king, apocalypse or no apocalypse. As a supervisor, Zhang Yi knew every shelf, security camera, and personnel schedule in the warehouse. Getting everything out wouldn't be hard at all. With the plan in place, Zhang Yi felt his stress melt away. Growl. His stomach rumbled. He glanced at the takeout he'd bought, still sitting on the table. Without a second thought, he tossed it into the trash. 1 month until the end of the world. Time to eat like a king while I still can. Why save money? After the apocalypse, money would be worthless, so he might as well blow it all now. He turned, ready to find the nearest Michelin 3-star restaurant and have the meal of his life. Chapter 2 White Lotus. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhang Yi stepped out of the house and into a peaceful world, a scene of contentment and simple joys. Parents were playing with their kids in the community square, their faces bright with smiles, but Zhang Yi knew it was all an illusion that would shatter in a month. He hurried out of the complex. Not far away was a Michelin 3-star restaurant. A meal there could easily set you back 5,000 or 6,000. Zhang Yi used to balk at the cost, but not anymore. He walked inside, grabbed a window seat, and ordered every expensive dish on the menu, plus a bottle of Chateau Lafite. The total came to $5,000. Even the waiters were giving him the side-eye, convinced he had to be a trust fund kid. Who else would blow that kind of money on a single meal? Zhang Yi didn't give a damn what they thought. When the food arrived, he started shoveling it down. Maybe it was the memory of 6 months of icy apocalypse, but the taste was so incredible it almost brought him to tears. He ate with a ferocity that turned heads, sparking whispers among the other diners. Zhang Yi ignored them. They had no idea what was coming. After the world ended, people would grovel for a single pack of ramen. Civilization and morality would be meaningless. As Zhang Yi ate, a woman stopped outside the window. Long, flowing hair, perfect makeup, and Gucci heels. It was Fang Yuqing, the woman who'd killed him in his past life. Standing next to her was her best friend, Li Canning. Spotting the Michelin 3-star restaurant, they couldn't help but take a second look. This kind of high-end place was a fantasy for them. They couldn't afford to splurge there, but that didn't stop them from scanning the inside, hoping to spot a rich, eligible bachelor they could snag. Fang Yuqing was stunned to see Zhang Yi inside, a feast laid out before him. Isn't that Zhang Yi? How can he afford this place? Lin Canning gasped, covering her mouth. Zhang Yi. He's loaded. But she gave Fang Yuqing a knowing look and said with a giggle, "Girl, you hit the jackpot. That simp who's been chasing you is secretly rich. Look at that spread. He's dropping at least 5-6 grand. Regular people don't eat like that." That there was a hint of envy in her voice. She knew Zhang Yi had been after Fang Yuqing for months. Fang Yuqing had kept him on a string, neither accepting nor rejecting him. A dyed-in-the-wool gold digger. Fang Yuqing had always dreamed of marrying a wealthy man and living the good life, but she couldn't quite bring herself to ditch Zhang Yi, a guy with a car and a house in Tianhai City. So she'd kept him as a backup plan. Now, seeing Zhang Yi enjoying a lavish meal, she started to have doubts. Could Zhang Yi actually be an undercover rich dude? Fang Yuqing rested her chin on her hand, thinking hard. The more she considered it, the more it seemed possible. Wait, isn't that a plot from TV shows all the time? A rich guy pretends to be ordinary to find true love. She was buying into the idea now, her eyes gleaming. If it was true, it would save her a lot of work. After all, Zhang Yi had been pursuing her relentlessly. She figured she could get him to propose with a simple nod. Lin Canning chimed in, "Yuqing, let's go inside and talk to him." Truthfully, she was eyeing the spread. This was a Michelin 3-star restaurant. They'd probably never get the chance to eat like this again. Fang Yuqing hesitated, then shook her head. That's too obvious. He'll think I'm a gold digger. We'll wait outside and act like we ran into him by accident. Fang Yuqing wasn't stupid. She wasn't about to lower herself for a single meal. Even if Zhang Yi was loaded, she had to play the goddess. That way, when they got together, she could keep him under her thumb and make him her personal ATM. So, the two of them ducked around the corner, waiting for Zhang Yi to leave the restaurant. Zhang Yi ate for over an hour, patting his full belly with satisfaction. Next, he planned to hit up a nearby supermarket for supplies and head home. He was confident in his plan to raid the Walmart warehouse, but he needed to be careful on such a long drive. Better to stock up in advance, just in case. He was a man who had known hunger and wasn't taking any chances. Zhang Yi paid the bill, beaming, and walked out of the restaurant as the waiter gave him a friendly farewell. Just then, a familiar voice called out, "Zhang Yi." What a coincidence! He turned to see Fang Yuqing and Lin Canning. Fang Yuqing reached up to tuck her hair behind her ear, deliberately exposing her fair neck and pink earlobes. Zhang Yi smirked inwardly. It was a classic maneuver straight from the green tea playbook, designed to make a man's heart skip a beat. Fang Yuqing, the queen of green tea and faux innocence, was an expert. Too bad for her, the Zhang Yi standing before her wasn't the pushover she remembered. After all, this was the woman who had killed him, even breaking his ribs to make soup. A wave of cold rage washed over him, a raw, murderous intent. The world was ending soon, anyway. No one would care if she disappeared. Fang Yuqing felt a shiver run down her spine at his gaze, and she stammered, "Zhang Yi, are you okay?" Zhang Yi quickly masked his feelings and said casually, "It's nothing. I thought you were someone else." He'd changed his mind. Killing her now would be too easy. Better to let her experience the full horror of the apocalypse, than take her out with a well-placed trap. With his memories and a little planning, he could make her suffer in 100 different ways. For now, he needed to focus on building the safest shelter he could, a place where he could survive the end of days in comfort and security. Chapter 3 Shopping Spree. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhang Yi's attitude was ice-cold. Fang Yuqing and Lin Canning picked up on the change in his demeanor. However, now convinced Zhang Yi was secretly rich, instead of getting offended, they doubled down and tried to get closer to him. "Hey, Zhang Yi, were you just eating at that restaurant?" Lin Canning asked, trying to sound casual. Zhang Yi frowned. He knew she was up to no good, just like Fang Yuqing. They both played a part in screwing him over. "Yup." Zhang Yi replied curtly, then shoved his hands in his pockets, turned, and headed toward the supermarket. Fang Yuqing and Lin Canning quickly fell into step beside him. "Zhang Yi, where are you off to?" Fang Yuqing asked with a sweet smile. "Supermarket." Zhang Yi's voice was still cold, tinged with impatience. If he didn't want her to experience the full horror of the apocalypse, he would have offed her himself. Fang Yuqing shot Lin Canning a look, then quickly said, "What a coincidence. We were just about to do some shopping, too. We're headed that way." Zhang Yi understood the game now. They must have seen him splurging at the Michelin-starred place and jumped to the conclusion he was some kind of secret trust fund baby. That was the only explanation for their sudden interest. He didn't waste words, just kept walking toward the supermarket. But the more aloof he acted, the more convinced Fang Yuqing and Lin Canning became that he was loaded. Otherwise, why be such a snob? The two trailed after Zhang Yi, with Fang Yuqing even brushing against him, sometimes reaching out to graze his arm. Whenever Zhang Yi looked her way, she'd blush and demurely turn her head, acting all shy. Zhang Yi snorted inwardly, "What a gold digger. She could win an Oscar with that performance." Zhang Yi entered the supermarket, grabbed a cart, and started down the aisles. Fang Yuqing and Lin Canning hustled to get their own carts and followed. "Zhang Yi, are you having dinner with someone?" Fang Yuqing asked, all smiles. Zhang Yi headed toward the food section and said flatly, "Does it look like it?" Fang Yuqing's eyes lit up. She quickly said, "Oh, no, that's not what I meant. It's just, that place is pretty pricey." "I figured you must be treating someone." Lin Canning couldn't help but ask, "Zhang Yi, doesn't your salary barely crack 10 grand a month? That meal must have cost you half a year's pay." Fang Yuqing shot Lin Canning a sharp glare. "Idiot, you don't just blurt things like that out. As a master manipulator, the golden rule is, talk feelings with the rich and money with the poor." Lin Canning realized she'd screwed up and quickly backtracked. Ha ha ha, I was just kidding. We're all friends here, right? Money doesn't matter. But Zhang Yi ignored them completely. He arrived at the food aisles and stared at the overwhelming array of products on the shelves, like he'd stumbled into Alibaba's cave. In his previous life, he was eating one pack of ramen for 2 days, so, he had an overwhelming hunger for food. Zhang Yi beelined to the shelves and began loading up his cart. He grabbed stacks of hot dogs, instant noodles, self-heating hot pots, and seasonings. Fang Yuqing and Lin Caning were gobsmacked. Zhang Yi, why are you buying so much food? Are you going camping or something? Yup. Zhang Yi replied curtly. Lin Caning started to get suspicious and whispered to Fang Yuqing, would rich guys eat this stuff when they go camping? Fang Yuqing was also confused, but after the Michelin 3-star meal, she didn't want to give up on the trust fund baby theory. She rushed to Zhang Yi and asked helpfully, is there anything I can do to help? When free labor showed up, Zhang Yi had no reason to say no. And looking at Fang Yuqing in her fake, sweet smile, Zhang Yi got a vindictive idea. He wanted Fang Yuqing to know he had a lot of supplies. Then, when the end of the world came, and she came begging, he was going to tell her to get lost. The corners of Zhang Yi's mouth twitched into a slight smile. Yeah, you can push the cart. Fang Yuqing quickly nodded in agreement. Zhang Yi told Lin Caning to get another cart. Even though they were confused, they did as they were told. Zhang Yi bought a ton of storable foods, including instant noodles, hot dogs, bacon, and canned goods. He even got a whole cart just for fresh meat, fruits, and veggies, and some live fish. He wanted to test whether his storage space had any special properties for preserving fresh food. When the 3 carts were full, Zhang Yi told the 2 women to push the carts full of beef, mutton, and canned food. They had to weigh at least 500 pounds, which made them sweat from exhaustion. Fang Yuqing started to complain a little, pouting and saying, Zhang Yi, how many people are you feeding? You doing something without me? Zhang Yi smiled slyly, and said, the end of the world is coming. I'm stocking up to survive. Fang Yuqing just thought Zhang Yi was joking, and said with a laugh, oh, fine, don't tell me if you don't want to. Why make a joke like that? I did just help you today, so you should buy me dinner. Fang Yuqing's eyes were suggestive. She was hoping Zhang Yi would take her to the Michelin 3-star restaurant. Zhang Yi smiled slightly, sure, I will. But I'm busy, so I won't have much time. Next month. Fang Yuqing said happily, that's good, it's a date. Lin Caning hurried over, okay, let's go together, hee. Of course she would be happy to get a big meal just by pushing the cart. Seeing Lin Caning so blind, Fang Yuqing glared at her again, but Lin Caning just pretended to not see it. Zhang Yi settled the bill and bought more than $10,000 in supplies in one go. He paid without hesitation. In the apocalypse, that would be worth at least tens of thousands of times more. Since Zhang Yi bought so many things, the supermarket happily lent him the carts. Zhang Yi told the 2 women to help him push the stuff home. He had a car, so he could drive them back, but if there was free labor, there was no need. Even though the 2 women said that they were tired, they had plenty of motivation after Zhang Yi promised to get them a big meal, so, a group of 3 people pushed 3 carts of supplies home, surprising onlookers. Chapter 4 5-star hotel orders 500 banquets. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The 3 of them got back to the neighborhood with the 3 carts of supplies, sparking a lot of gossip among the neighbors who saw them. Zhang Yi wasn't worried about being seen. Some neighbors had already spotted him at the supermarket. Besides, Fang Yuqing and Lin Caning were sure to spread the news anyway. No point in hiding. He even figured some people might try to break into his place to steal stuff eventually. He'd been through it before. But he wasn't scared this time, because he was ready. Let them look, but they couldn't touch a thing. They'd just be left fuming. Zhang Yi and Fang Yuqing lived in the same apartment building. Since Zhang Yi worked as a warehouse manager at Walmart, neighbors often asked him to score them deals on discounted items, so everyone knew him. When they saw Zhang Yi and the others hauling back so much stuff, an auntie taking her grandson for a walk strolled over. She eyed the groceries and the fresh beef and lamb, and her eyes lit up. Xiao Zhang, why are you bringing back so much? Did you get a hookup from the warehouse? You can't possibly use all that. Why not share some with the neighbors? This was Aunt Lin, who worked at the property management office. She liked throwing her weight around and acting like she was in charge. Zhang Yi used to help her snag cheap, discounted stuff, and she always tried to get something for nothing. In his previous life, she had badgered him for food, but when the neighbors stormed his house to rob him, she led the charge. Fang Yuqing and Lin Caning didn't want any trouble with her, so they quickly chimed in. Zhang Yi bought all this. We're just helping him carry it back. Aunt Lin turned her attention to Zhang Yi, flashing a fake smile. Xiao Zhang, looks like some warehouse goodies. How about giving Aunt Lin a little something? While she was talking, her grandson, Xiaohu, had already clambered onto a cart, grabbing for a box of chocolates. He was small, but his eyes were sharp. That imported chocolate cost a pretty penny at the store. Zhang Yi snatched the box back without a word. Then, he told Aunt Lin coldly, sorry, these are all for me. That the end was coming anyway, and he wasn't about to be polite now. Aunt Lin's face soured. You. She was pissed that Zhang Yi wasn't giving her, the self-proclaimed leader, any respect, especially since her grandson, Xiaohu, was now bawling for the chocolate Zhang Yi had yanked away. The kid doesn't know any better. How about you just give him a box of chocolates? I'll pay you back later. Aunt Lin's tone was sharp. Zhang Yi's mouth twitched. Everyone used mobile payment these days. It was super easy. Saying she'd pay him back was a clear sign she was planning to skip out on the bill. Like I said, I'm eating this myself. If you want some, go buy it at the supermarket. Zhang Yi scoffed, then waved Fang Yuqing and Lin Caning on and left. Aunt Lin started yelling after them as soon as they turned their backs. Zhang Yi ignored her. Aunt Lin's son and daughter-in-law worked out of town, so she was stuck taking care of her grandson. Normally, the old woman only bought enough groceries for the day, so, after the apocalypse, their family would be the first to run out. At first, Zhang Yi was sympathetic, but without his help this time, it was a miracle if that greedy old woman and her bratty grandson, Xiaohu, lasted 10 days. Zhang Yi didn't want to have to deal with them turning into zombies. It wasn't about being cruel. After that day, everyone would be fighting for their own survival. Other people's life or death would have to take a back seat. After they got the 3 carts of supplies home, Zhang Yi dismissed them. Zhang Yi, don't forget to have us over. Fang Yuqing winked at him playfully, but all Zhang Yi felt was a wave of nausea. He gave them a non-committal answer. The 2 women had been hoping to hang around, fishing for clues that Zhang Yi was a secret rich kid, but seeing that Zhang Yi wasn't interested in entertaining them, they had no choice but to leave. Once they were gone, Zhang Yi opened up his personal dimension and started loading everything in. He wanted to see if the space had any effect on the stuff. By the time he was finished, it was late. Zhang Yi didn't go to bed. Instead he grabbed a pen and paper and started mapping out his preparations for the next month. He was usually lazy, but when it came to survival, he knew he could step up. If I want to live comfortably through the apocalypse, I need to solve the food problem first. That's doable. Besides what I've bought, I can always grab stuff from the warehouse. But I'll save that and do some research first. And I need to collect it a few days before the end to avoid raising suspicion. If I get caught, I definitely won't survive in jail. Zhang Yi wrote food in his notebook and put a check mark beside it. Next, heating. After the apocalypse, power will be scarce, and the air conditioner won't work for long. Gotta go with the simplest method. Fireplace is the way to go. Fireplaces were basically heated floors. Temperatures in Europe got super cold in winter. The house is gonna need some serious work. Insulation, for starters. Speaking of redoing the house, Zhang Yi couldn't help but think about his place being trashed in his previous life. I need to turn my place into an impenetrable fortress. I'm talking thick steel plating, something that can withstand a blast. After the end of the world, people would do anything to survive, so he had to be prepared. His life depended on it. Zhang Yi had tasted death once, and he had zero interest in experiencing it again. The safe house problem was solvable, too. There was a security company in town that specialized in security for the wealthy. They even built safe rooms. Zhang Yi remembered a super rich guy in his previous life who had built a fortress that could even survive a nuke. And then, medicine. Gotta keep myself from getting terminally ill. There's plenty of basic medicine at the Walmart warehouse, enough for colds and fevers. But it's not enough. The cataclysm is gonna last for decades, minimum. I need to be fully prepared. Luckily, Zhang Yi had a decent network in the city. He was in warehouse management, so he knew some hospital warehouse staff. With enough cash, he could get his hands on anything. Once those problems were taken care of, Zhang Yi tapped his pen on the notebook. Last thing to deal with. His eyes narrowed. Weapons, that the end was coming, and humanity was going down the drain. Fights over supplies would be everywhere, life would be cheap. If you wanted to live, you needed firepower. Zhang Yi wasn't a fighter, but even a master of martial arts feared a kitchen knife. As long as his weapons were powerful enough, he wouldn't have to worry. Machetes, crowbars, and axes are easy to come by. There are also sources for crossbows, air guns, and compound bows. But the deadliest option is Iaido swords. Those can only be found on the black market. Zhang Yi rubbed his chin. This one was tricky, but he still had a month. If he was willing to spend the money, he could probably get it done. It took him 3 hours to finalize his plan. Then, he took a long, hot shower and crashed into his comfortable bed. The next morning, Zhang Yi woke up. He hadn't slept well, jolting awake several times from nightmares. He was relieved to find himself in his own warm bed. The doomsday period had messed with his head. To avoid reliving that nightmare, Zhang Yi strengthened his resolve and committed himself to being fully prepared. After waking up, Zhang Yi made himself some breakfast. Then, he opened up his personal dimension and checked on the supplies he'd stashed inside. To his delight, the meat, fruits, and vegetables were exactly the same as before. Meat can be kept for a short time, but fruits and vegetables tended to get stale quickly. However, the ones in the space looked like they'd just been bought. My personal dimension is separate from this world. The rules of time must be different too. Maybe time flows slower, or it's even frozen. This is amazing. I can put anything in there without worrying about it spoiling. But when Zhang Yi checked the fish, he realized they were all dead. They looked lifelike, but they were dead. Zhang Yi stroked his chin, starting to understand how the space worked. Live creatures can't survive long inside. Looks like I can't live in there myself. That wasn't a huge problem. The space in the dimension was vast and white, not as comfortable as Zhang Yi's own home. As long as he could store things in there, he was happy. Thinking about it that way, Zhang Yi had a lot of ideas. If he could store fresh meat, vegetables, and fruits, what about prepared meals? He could cook, but he wasn't a professional chef. If he could only cook his own meals, he would get sick of it sooner or later. So, Zhang Yi immediately called the biggest 5-star hotel in the city. Hello, this is Hongfu Tianxia Hotel. How may I help you? Zhang Yi said, I want to throw a banquet at my house, 3 days and 3 nights. So I need to order 500 tables of food. The person on the other end of the phone was stunned. 500 tables? That would take them forever to cook, plus, they were a 5-star hotel. The cheapest banquet cost thousands of dollars a table. 500 tables. That was $1 million order. The waiter didn't know what to do. Please hold for one moment, I'll ask my manager. After a minute, someone else picked up. Hello sir, my name is Chen Dingfang, the manager of Hongfu Hotel. How can I address you? Chapter 5 Loans for Money. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhang Yi answered, name's Zhang Yi. I need to reserve 500 banquet tables. Anything? That the manager was floored. Never in the hotel's history had they seen anything like this. Still, an order that huge was definitely worth pursuing. Mr. Zhang, 500 banquet tables will run into the millions. We can get right on it, but we'll need a $20 deposit up front. No problem, Zhang Yi said. I'll send you the account number, and I'll wire the money over. Money talks, and the manager was quick to agree. He added Zhang Yi as a contact and sent the bank info. Zhang Yi transferred the $20 without hesitation. The manager, after the accountant confirmed the deposit, immediately started giving orders. Let's move people, we've got a massive order to fill. Purchasing, get the supplies rolling, and the kitchen, no more takeout for now. We need those 500 banquet tables ready by tomorrow. Back at home, after hanging up, Zhang Yi couldn't help but sigh. Even if the money's worthless in a month, it still takes money to buy things right now. Between his parents' inheritance and his own savings, he had around $200 million. Now, half of it was gone, and he felt a twinge of pain, but then he figured, hey, it could be worse. A lot of people were sitting on piles of cash that were about to turn into confetti. Not everyone got the chance to spend their dough. Still, I'm gonna need money for things later. Gotta find a way to get some more. Zhang Yi's eyes landed on his apartment. It was in the city center, about 1,300 square feet. The building was maybe 10 years old. At today's prices, it'd be worth about $4,000 a square foot, so, the place was worth at least $5 million. That's it, a mortgage. Then I'll have money. Zhang Yi chuckled. Since he wasn't paying it back anyway, it felt like free money. He immediately left to head to the bank for a loan. On the way, he got a text from Fang Yuqing. Zhang Yi, this weekend's a drag. I wish I had someone to hang out with. Zhang Yi glanced at it and tossed the phone aside. He arrived at the bank to start the loan process. Because of the high loan amount and complete paperwork, plus the apartment's appraisal value, the loan went through quickly. The bank was willing to lend him $4 million. Zhang Yi didn't haggle. Since it was all free money, he didn't bother arguing. After signing on the dotted line, the bank transferred the funds to his account. So, with the banquet over $100,000, I still have $5 million or so. That should cover the renovation, but I still need to buy medicine and weapons. Might not be enough. Zhang Yi rubbed his chin, pondering how to get more cash. Just then, a guy with yellow hair spotted Zhang Yi deep in thought by the side of the road, his eyes lighting up as he approached. Hey, you need some money, man? Zhang Yi looked up at the guy. Who are you? Yellow hair's grin widened, and he lowered his voice. I'm asking, you need money now. But the bank won't give you any. Zhang Yi immediately realized what this guy was about. A loan shark, definitely. Zhang Yi's heart skipped a beat, and he made up his mind. He sighed, acting embarrassed. Yeah, my family's business needs cash flow. But the bank. He deliberately looked flustered. Yellow hair was all over it. Anyone who could get a regular bank loan wouldn't be talking to a shark, right? He said to Zhang Yi, right, banks are a pain these days. So many rules, and it takes forever to get the money. But if you need cash quick, I can help you out. Zhang Yi eyed yellow hair cautiously. You sure? I need millions. Hearing the size of the deal, yellow hair got even more excited. He pulled a business card from his pocket and handed it to Zhang Yi. Our company specializes in getting people out of a bind. If you need money, come to us. Zhang Yi glanced at the card, doomsday Financial Services Company, Limited. And yellow hair's name was Lianhua, business manager. Zhang Yi pretended to be excited. You can really lend me money? I need $5 million. If you can help me out, I guarantee I can pay it back in 3 months, tops. Lianhua smiled. Easy peasy. Our company's got serious muscle. We're here to help people like you who are strapped for cash. Come on, let's head to the office and talk about the details. Zhang Yi nodded eagerly, following Lianhua to their office. The so-called office was in a rundown building. Inside, Lianhua led Zhang Yi to the boss's office. The boss looked like a tough guy, but he was wearing a fancy suit, clearly trying to project a legitimate image. But there was a hard edge in his eyes. You only got that kind of look from years of hard knocks. Lianhua introduced Zhang Yi's situation to the boss. Boss, this is a client looking for a loan. The boss's name was Qin Xiong. He smiled at Zhang Yi and gestured for him to sit. Mr. Zhang, how much do you need? Typical loan shark, straight to the point. These companies weren't formal anyway, so they didn't have a lot of rules and regulations, and they had plenty of ways to make you pay up, so they weren't worried about you skipping out. Zhang Yi said, I need $5 million. Qin Xiong frowned. That's a lot of money. Mr. Zhang, you need to know up front, our interest rates are very high. You have to be ready for that. Hu Minghua chimed in, Mr. Zhang's business needs the cash fast. When the money starts flowing, you'll make it all back in no time. Right? That they were working together, and Zhang Yi could see it all, he still pretended to be desperate. Yeah, I can pay it back soon. The higher the interest, the better. Just as long as you can get me the money. Chapter 6 Building a Top Safe House. You are listening at novelfull.audio. A smile spread across Qin Xiong's face. Alright, our interest rate is 4%. Borrow 500 million, pay back 700 million. So, you'll need to sign a 700 million IOU. And, you gotta put up some collateral of equal value. House, factory, car, whatever works. Zhang Yi feigned hesitation, then with a visible effort, pulled out his property deed. He'd been planning to use it for a bank loan and just happened to have it on him. The house is worth well over 500 million. How about I mortgage it? I also have a Mercedes, worth about 300,000. You can have it if I can't pay. Qin Xiong, never having seen such an eager customer, snatched the deed for a quick look. Seeing the property details, he was even more pleased. Based on the current market, the house could easily fetch 550 million. Throw in the car, and this deal was a guaranteed win. Still, Qin Xiong adopted a dissatisfied expression. Mr. Zhang, your house is worth maybe 500 million at best. But if I'm handing you 500 million, where's the profit for me? Zhang Yi looked stricken, saying anxiously, Boss Chen, you gotta help me out. I'm desperate for cash right now. If you can get me the money today, I only need 450 million. Qin Xiong and Hu Minghua exchanged a glance, a hint of predatory glee in their eyes. They specialized in taking advantage of people in tight spots. The more desperate someone was, the bigger the score. Nah, no, this deal just isn't worth it. Finally, after some haggling, they settled on 400 million. Zhang Yi insisted, though, that the money had to be in his account that day. While the loan company was shady, their efficiency was impressive. It was probably the only advantage they had over banks. After signing the contract, Zhang Yi had 400 million credited to his account in no time. He chuckled to himself. For Qin Xiong, this money was like throwing good money after bad, never to be seen again. Wait, did that just sound like he was insulting himself? Zhang Yi grinned and left with the cash. As soon as he was gone, Qin Xiong and Hu Minghua erupted in laughter in the office. Ha ha ha. Easiest deal ever. That sucker just walked off with 400 million, Qin Xiong bragged, we'll make at least 2 or 3 million on this deal. No worries about this month's numbers. Hu Minghua leaned against the table, grinning. Boss, he was so happy to sign. Is there something wrong with the house? Qin Xiong waved the deed. It's legit, no problem there. As long as the house is his, he's trapped. That with the deed and a 700 million IOU in hand, they had plenty of ways to seize the property and plenty more ways to squeeze Zhang Yi dry. Qin Xiong narrowed his eyes and took a leisurely sip of his coffee. If necessary, contact some overseas outfits and see if there's anything else on him we can sell off. We never take a loss. Zhang Yi left the loan company feeling great. He glanced back at the office building, a touch of sarcasm playing on his lips. These guys are so generous. Just handing me free money. From now on, Zhang Yi, Qin Xiong, and Hu Minghua would have no further dealings. More likely, they'd all be dead from the coming cold wave in a month. Zhang Yi now had about 900 million to work with, enough to put his plan into motion. Zhang Yi drove to Zhanlong Security, the most famous security company in Tianhai City. Zhanlong was one of the biggest in China, specializing in security for the rich and powerful. Even the government sometimes called on them for high-level security. Zhang Yi sought them out because, in his previous life, he'd heard Zhanlong built a top-tier safe house for the richest man in Jiangnan province. The real estate mogul was said to be living comfortably through the apocalypse, and that was thanks to Zhanlong's bunker. Zhang Yi arrived at Zhanlong and explained his needs to the receptionist. He was immediately ushered to a lounge by someone from the sales department. The receptionist brought him freshly brewed coffee. Soon after, a burly man with bulging biceps and a crew cut entered. He wore a black suit, looking like a mob enforcer who'd squeezed into it. He inspired confidence. "Hello, sir. I'm Wu Huiran, head of sales. How can we help you?" That Wu Huiran sat down and asked Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi took a sip of coffee and said, "I need you to build me a safe house. The highest level safe house possible, one that can withstand the end of the world." Wu Huiran's expression turned serious. Most people would laugh off such a statement. Nobody really believed in the end of the world, but Zhanglong took it seriously. The wealthiest and most powerful people were often the most terrified of death. Years ago, some foreign tycoons had spent over $1 billion building doomsday bunkers. Since then, millionaires around the world had followed suit. Some genuinely feared large-scale disasters, others simply had too many enemies and wanted a sense of security. Zhanglong Securities' doomsday safe houses were a natural response to that market. Hearing Zhang Yi wanted a doomsday-proof safe house, Wu Huiran became extra polite. They only got a handful of orders like this each year. "Mr. Zhang, Zhanglong is a world-class security company. We can definitely meet your needs." Wu Huiran produced a tablet and handed it to Zhang Yi. "Our services are fully customized. You can choose what you need. The prices are listed." This was the information age. Zhang Yi took the tablet and began to carefully review the services. A professional company was a professional company. If you had the cash, Zhanglong Security could handle just about anything, including building safe houses hundreds of feet underground or underwater, but those projects would take too long. Zhang Yi only had a month. Chapter 7: Buying Equipment. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After Zhang Yi finished reviewing the safe house options, he immediately selected his preferred features. First, a complete structural reinforcement of the house. This involved replacing all existing materials. The walls, ceilings, and floors would all be constructed from 4-inch thick steel plates. The windows would be replaced with bulletproof plexiglass. Second, an air filtration system would be installed within the ventilation system. This would prevent any harmful gases from entering the house. Finally, a comprehensive surveillance system would be installed to monitor the interior and exterior of the house, leaving no blind spots. The doors would be replaced with thick metal doors, made of the same material as bank vaults, making them nearly bomb-proof. In short, Zhang Yi's only requirement was to transform his house into an impenetrable fortress. After Zhang Yi was done, he handed the computer over to Wu Huiran. Wu Huiran read through the selections, his eyes widening in surprise. A house of only 1,300 square feet, built like an iron box. Add some weapons, and this place is practically a fortress, that Wu Huiran muttered to himself. Zhang Yi's eyes lit up when he heard this. "Oh. You know something about fortresses," Wu Huiran chuckled. "I used to be a mercenary overseas. I know military tactics and hardware like the back of my hand." A thought sparked in Zhang Yi's mind. He lowered his voice and asked Wu Huiran, "Could you get me a gun?" Wu Huiran's expression turned serious. "Private gun ownership is illegal in Huagua. Mr. Zhang, you understand that, in principle, that kind of thing is not allowed." Wu Huiran whispered back. "Did you run into a serious enemy that's got you so scared?" Zhang Yi tried to play it off. "That's right, I ticked off some dangerous people. They're playing for keeps, and they've got guns. I was just wondering if I could get some weapons for self-defense. Otherwise, I'll be stuck hiding in my house, waiting to get shot up, which isn't going to work." Wu Huiran chuckled. "Mr. Zhang, I don't think I can help you with that. We're a legitimate company." But Zhang Yi could tell from Wu Huiran's eyes that it wasn't that he couldn't get a gun, but that he didn't want to get involved. Zhang Yi took a deep breath. Then he said to Wu Huiran, "This safe house project I'm paying for costs almost $150 million. If something happens to me afterward, it's not going to look good for your company." He stared at Wu Huiran, and said each word carefully, "I just want something for self-defense. If you can help me with this, I'll make it worth your while." Wu Huiran didn't respond. He was frowning, considering the situation. Of course, he had connections, but he didn't know Zhang Yi's background, so he was hesitant to introduce him to those contacts. "You go back for now. Although I can't do this myself, I can ask around for you. If I hear anything, I'll be in touch. Wu Huiren clearly couldn't make a decision right away, but Zhang Yi didn't push it. Guns are a sensitive subject, he smiled and said, okay, I'll wait to hear from you. Also, this is pretty urgent, so please start building the safe house as soon as possible. Wu Huiren replied, we should be able to finish it in 2 weeks, tops. After finalizing the details with Wu Huiren, Zhang Yi signed the contract then and there. He also paid a deposit of $15 million. As for the rest of the payment, well, they wouldn't be seeing that. He left Zhanglong Security Company. The issue of safe housing was settled. Next, Zhang Yi got back in his car and called an acquaintance, Lu Yang. Lu Yang ran a hunting preserve in Tianhai City. He managed hundreds of acres in Xishan, stocked with all kinds of harmless small animals for recreational hunting. He had plenty of legally obtained crossbows, compound bows, and air rifles. Zhang Yi had gone there a few times before, so he had Lu Yang's contact information. He called Lu Yang to help him buy a batch of equipment, offering to pay a premium. Lu Yang was a businessman, and he sometimes called on Zhang Yi for favors, so he readily agreed. Brother Zhang, why are you buying so much equipment? Those things are only for hunting, or just playing around. You aren't going to hurt anyone with them, Lu Yang asked with a smile, but his tone was cautious. After all, he would be the one selling the equipment. If Zhang Yi used the weapons to hurt someone, he would be in trouble too. Of course, someone who could run a hunting preserve in Tianhai City had to have connections, but there was no need to risk anything for Zhang Yi, just an ordinary friend. Zhang Yi laughed, you're thinking too much. I'm going on a hunting trip with some buddies, we're hitting up an African safari park soon. That's why I need more gear. Lu Yang clicked his tongue, wow, brother Zhang really knows how to live. But be careful, there are lots of lions and hyenas in Africa. Yeah, will do. When can I pick everything up? Shoot, I've got stuff ready to go. Come by when you have time. Zhang Yi didn't waste any time and drove straight to the Xishan hunting preserve, where he bought the equipment. For him, time was precious. He bought 5 high-quality steel crossbows, 3 top-of-the-line compound bows, and 300 arrows and bolts from Lu Yang. He also picked up 2 excellent hunting knives. These were made from Damascus steel, incredibly tough and sharp, and nearly indestructible unless used to chop hard objects repeatedly. The equipment filled the trunk. Looking at everything, Zhang Yi felt a surge of security. He drove everything home since everything was purchased through legitimate channels, and he even had a hunting license for recreational use. He wasn't worried about being questioned by the cops. By the time he got home, dusk had fallen. Zhang Yi headed out again and ate hot pot at Haidaleo. Realizing he might have to cook hot pot for himself in the future, he decided to order 10,000 servings of hot pot base from Haidaleo. The waiters were dumbfounded, wondering if Zhang Yi was some sort of saboteur. Fortunately, Haidaleo's customer service was top-notch, so they didn't confront Zhang Yi directly. Eventually, the manager came over and took Zhang Yi's order after confirming he was serious. The condition, however, was that Zhang Yi pay in cash. To protect Haidaleo from being targeted by a competing business, Zhang Yi paid up without hesitation, dropping over $15 million on the spot. The store manager was overjoyed and even threw in 500 extra servings as a gift. Chapter 8. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhang Yi gave the address and asked the Haidaleo employees to deliver the hot pot broth. He figured they could grab the ingredients from Walmart's warehouse when they came. Good hot pot ingredients just aren't readily available. Even the pre-packaged stuff you can buy doesn't hold a candle to what you get in the restaurant. Otherwise, nobody would bother going out for hot pot. After eating, Zhang Yi was about to head home when he got a call from the 5-star hotel manager. Mr. Zhang, we've prepped those 500 banquets you ordered. When's a good time to send them over? Go ahead and send them. Zhang Yi went home to wait for his feast to arrive. 500 tables of food. That's enough to last him 2 or 3 years. He still had 89 million burning a hole in his pocket, so he wasn't worried about the expense. He was just itching to spend it. On the way back, Zhang Yi started thinking about what else he wanted to eat. He ended up placing orders with several of Tianhai City's top restaurants, 100 tables from each. thousands of tables spanning all 8 major cuisines, including Western food. He had just bought half a lifetime's worth of grub. Before long, the Hongfu Tianxia Hotel catering trucks pulled up to the entrance of Yuelu community. 20 or 30 vehicles, a real convoy, blocked the whole road, leaving the neighbors dumbfounded. Uncle Yu, the security guard, hurried over to ask what was going on. The hotel manager explained, but Uncle Yu insisted on seeing the resident before letting them through. It was a lot of vehicles, and he had no idea what they were carrying. He wasn't about to compromise the community's security. The hotel manager had no choice but to call Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi came downstairs to the community gate. By now, a crowd had gathered, including neighbors from his building and, of course, Fang Yuqing and Lin Caning, who were there for the spectacle. Zhang Yi walked up to Uncle Yu and said with a smile, "Uncle Yu, it's all for me." "Let them in." Uncle Yu was taken aback. "Meal delivery? What are you eating? Enough to fill a dozen trucks." The neighbors were buzzing when they heard it was catering. "Holy cow, there must be hundreds of tables here. Is Zhang Yi throwing a party or something? Could he be getting hitched? Even then, hundreds of tables is crazy. Look closer, that's Hongfu Tianxia, a 5-star hotel. Booking hundreds of tables there. You're talking at least $1 million. Wow, $1 million banquet. Zhang Yi's been holding out on us." I knew they had a good foundation, but this is another level. The neighbors' eyes were on fire as they looked at Zhang Yi with a newfound respect. Fang Yuqing pursed her lips. This only strengthened her resolve to snag Zhang Yi. She sidled up to him and said with a sugary smile, "Zhang Yi, what are you up to? You've been buying so much lately." Zhang Yi ignored her and offered Uncle Yu a cigarette. Seeing the resident, Uncle Yu opened the gate and let the Hongfu Tianxia convoy in. Zhang Yi led the way. Even though Zhang Yi didn't acknowledge her, Fang Yuqing wasn't deterred. She was all smiles and chatter. "Anything you can't tell me? Aren't we good friends? I want to know more about you. Don't treat me like a stranger." Zhang Yi gave her a long, hard look and sneered, "I bought all this for my boss. And that dinner at the fancy restaurant?" He picked up the tab. He sighed, "Wish I was that rich." Fang Yuqing's expression shifted. You're not messing with me, are you?" Zhang Yi spread his hands. "Why would I lie? We've known each other for years. You know my situation. My parents are gone, and I'm just a warehouse supervisor. Where would I get that kind of money?" His explanation made Fang Yuqing's face fall. She had always suspected that a truly rich second generation had to be involved in some serious business. Zhang Yi's parents had been gone for years, and while they had left him some inheritance, he wasn't exactly rolling in dough. Now that Zhang Yi had admitted he wasn't a rich guy, all the pieces fell into place. She subtly distanced herself from him, ran her fingers through her hair, and said with a brittle smile, "Rich or not, we're still best friends, right? I'm not a gold digger." She emphasized the word friend with deliberate weight, a classic green tea move, always keeping a backup plan and a simp around. Zhang Yi's mouth twitched. He just stopped talking to her. Meanwhile, the Hongfu Tianxia employees started hauling tables of food into Zhang Yi's place. Zhang Yi had ordered the top-shelf stuff, abalone, sea cucumber, Australian lobster, truffles, caviar. His place definitely wasn't big enough to hold 500 tables of food. Even the hotel manager was looking stressed, but Zhang Yi told them just to move everything inside. He secretly took advantage of the chaos, slipping downstairs and transporting all the food into his private dimension. He was quick and quiet, so nobody noticed. Soon, all 500 tables of the banquet had been claimed by his personal space. That night, Zhang Yi got a call from Wu Huiren, the manager of Zhanlong Company. Wu Huiren told Zhang Yi they were ready to build his safe house whenever he wanted to know when it was convenient to start. Zhang Yi told them to come over tomorrow. He also planned to check into a hotel first. After the safe house chat, Zhang Yi was waiting for Wu Huiren to bring up the other thing he wanted. He had asked Wu Huiren for something even more important, a great equalizer. After a pause, Wu Huiren lowered his voice and said, "If you really need that, I can put you in touch with someone. But it's not going to be cheap." Zhang Yi nodded. Of course, but money was no object at this point. That's not a problem, as long as it's high quality. Wu Huiren replied easily, okay, in that case, I'll make the introduction. I'll let you know the meeting place in 3 days. Chapter 9 Super Warehouse. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The gun thing was settled, and Zhang Yi felt a whole lot better in the apocalypse. Having that thing gave him a huge confidence boost, whether he ran into people or, otherwise. The next day, Zhang Yi packed all the important stuff from his house into his personal dimension. Since the house was becoming a safe house, he'd crash at a hotel for a bit. Early that morning, 3 black vans pulled into Yuelu community. A bunch of workers from Zhanlong Company, all in uniforms, piled out and started measuring Zhang Yi's place. Neighbors were all craning their necks, curious as hell. Has Zhang Yi lost his marbles lately? What's with all the commotion? Some co-workers chuckled, seriously. I saw him at the supermarket the other day, buying 3 shopping carts full of food. Ha ha ha. You'd think the world was ending. He's gonna waste all that food when it expires. Maybe he's just cracked up. The general consensus was that Zhang Yi was acting weird, but nobody really cared. They just saw him as a joke. Even Fang Yuqing and Li Keining thought he was nuts. Li Keining suddenly piped up, I get it now. That's why he went to that fancy Michelin-starred restaurant the other day. His brains fried. Fang Yuqing frowned, definitely not thrilled. She remembered going out of her way to talk to Zhang Yi that day, helping him lug all that stuff home, and how tired her feet were. She felt a surge of annoyance. What the heck is Zhang Yi doing? Li Keining whined, he promised to treat us to a fancy meal. You don't think he's forgotten, do you, that she was dying to eat at a Michelin 3-star place? Fang Yuqing scoffed, forget it. Seeing him lately, even if he did invite me, I wouldn't go. I'd be mortified if anyone saw me eating with him. She was planning on landing a rich husband, and she couldn't risk her reputation. Li Keining, though disappointed, had to agree. Meanwhile, Zhang Yi couldn't care less what his neighbors thought. In a month, they'd see who the real joke was. Zhang Yi left the house and drove to the Walmart distribution center. It was Monday, time for work. Plus, he wanted to scout the place out, get ready for, the Walmart warehouse was in the economic development zone, on the edge of Tianhai City. Land was cheaper out there, so tons of big companies had their warehouses there. Even some pharmaceutical companies had warehouses there, which would make it easier for Zhang Yi to snag some special meds later. When Zhang Yi got to the Walmart warehouse, he clocked in like normal as the warehouse supervisor. He knew this place like the back of his hand. Every aisle, every shelf was practically precious to him. He used to be bored out of his mind coming here, but today, seeing those massive warehouses and billions of dollars worth of supplies, he could barely contain his excitement, because soon, he was going to take it all and turn it into his survival stash for the end times. As Walmart's main distribution center for South China, the sheer volume of stuff here was mind-blowing. They had tens of thousands of Cokes in stock alone. The whole place covered millions of square feet, and every kind of supply was piled sky-high. Besides food, clothes, and tools, they even had cars, drones, diesel generators, and barrels of gasoline. Pretty much anything you could buy at a supermarket, you could find it here. Zhang Yi had worked here for years, and he knew where everything was. He also knew the shift schedules and the camera placements. The security was tight, but he knew the loopholes. He could shut down the whole surveillance system in 10 minutes flat. Then, he'd use his personal dimension to make it all disappear. But for now, Zhang Yi wasn't rushing things. He had plenty of time. He didn't want to tip his hand. He wandered around the warehouse for a bit, then left. He grabbed a pack of yellow Crane Tower cigarettes and headed over to the ruining pharmaceutical company warehouse next door. Since he worked nearby, he knew some of the people there. Zhang Yi tracked down Zhou Hairun, one of the warehouse managers. They were on a first-name basis, workplace stuff at a big company warehouse. There were always people skimming off the top. Zhou Hairun's brother-in-law was a VP at Ruining Group, so he'd regularly swipe meds from the warehouse and sell them. Zhang Yi found Zhou Hairun, made some small talk, then subtly explained what he wanted. He hoped to score a few boxes of specialized medicine for emergencies. Zhou Hairun was wary at first, but then, Zhang Yi said he'd pay double the market price. Hearing that, Zhou Hairun couldn't resist. They struck a deal, 300 million for 5 boxes of medicine. With the meds in hand, Zhang Yi had basically prepped everything he needed for doomsday. With less than a month to go, he wasn't exactly feeling motivated to keep working. So he went to the warehouse manager's office and made up a story about his great-uncle passing away back home. He needed 20 days off to attend the funeral. Zhang Yi was well-liked at work and on good terms with the manager, so they didn't give him any trouble and approved his leave. For the next few weeks, Zhang Yi planned to kick back at a 5-star hotel, then, he'd wait for his supplies to arrive and for the safe house to be finished. Coming out of the manager's office, he saw Fang Yuqing pouring coffee by the coffee machine, practically sticking her butt out. You had to admit, that girl knew how to play the game. She had a natural flirtatiousness about her, just pouring coffee, and she still managed to wiggle her butt. Sure enough, some young bucks were already flocking over, eager to please. One guy, Zhou Peng, smiled and asked Fang Yuqing to go to Jay Chou's concert with him, waving the tickets like a trophy. Zhang Yi knew that guy, they lived in the same community, and he was Fang Yuqing's loyal simp. He was one of the guys who killed Zhang Yi in the previous timeline. Chapter 10. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhou Peng was all over Fang Yuqing, trying to impress her, but it was clear she wasn't interested in guys like him. He was way behind Zhang Yi financially, still renting a place. Still, she smiled and told him, "Thanks, Zhou Peng, but I've already got plans that night with a friend." What a bummer. Disappointment flashed across Zhou Peng's face. He'd blown a whole month's salary on those concert tickets. He'd been hoping to use the concert as a chance to tell her how he felt. Looks like that wasn't going to happen. Zhang Yi saw the whole thing and a little smile played on his lips. He knew Zhou Peng, the total simp, wasn't getting anywhere, but Zhou Peng, crushed as he was, saw Zhang Yi smirking and got pissed. Looking for a way to save face, he stomped over to Zhang Yi and said, "Hey, Zhang Yi, that's messed up. A big dude like you letting a woman carry your stuff. Aren't you embarrassed?" Yuqing was complaining all day about her back hurting. "Next time, don't bother her with that." Zhang Yi glanced at Fang Yuqing. "So, she'd been running her mouth." Fang Yuqing chimed in, all fake concern. "Oh, it's nothing, really. I'm just not used to heavy lifting, and I think I tweaked my back a little." She reached around and pinched her waist, then winced. Zhou Peng, eager to play the hero, pointed a finger at Zhang Yi. "Come on, cough up $500 for Yuqing to see a doctor." Zhang Yi's eyes turned cold. He glared at Zhou Peng and snapped, "She offered to help, I didn't ask her to do anything. Besides, who do you think you are, telling me what to do? You think you're all that?" Zhang Yi's outburst stunned both Zhou Peng and Fang Yuqing. Zhou Peng was just some warehouse drone, no power, no clout. He usually got away with bossing Zhang Yi around because Zhang Yi was laid back and didn't sweat the small stuff, but seeing Zhang Yi genuinely angry, Zhou Peng got scared. "Hey, why are you yelling? I was just talking to you." Zhang Yi just scoffed, turned around and walked away. He didn't have time for Zhou Peng's nonsense. Now, Zhang Yi looked at everyone like they were already dead. In a month, 99% of the people around him would be wiped out by the extreme cold storm. Why waste his breath on the walking dead? After Zhang Yi left, Zhou Peng whined to Fang Yuqing, "Yuqing, I'm telling you, that Zhang Yi is no good. You should stay away from him." Fang Yuqing frowned, puzzled. Lately, Zhang Yi seemed like a completely different person. He didn't go out of his way to say hi anymore, barely even said goodnight, just a quick night and that was it. Something's up, she thought. After work, Zhang Yi drove to a 5-star hotel in Tianhai City, the Hongfu Tianxia, just like he'd booked. When the manager heard Zhang Yi was coming, he practically rolled out the red carpet, getting him a room right away. A room in a 5-star hotel costs over $1,000 a night. Zhang Yi didn't even blink. He had a few million burning a hole in his pocket, and he figured it was a waste if he didn't spend it. That night, Miss Innocent Fang Yuqing texted Zhang Yi. Out of the blue, Fang Yuqing, "Zhang Yi, I passed by your place today and saw people doing renovations." Zhang Yi's mouth twitched. "Yeah, so?" Fang Yuqing, "You've been acting weird lately. Stockpiling stuff." fixing up your house. Is something going on? Zhang Yi raised his eyebrows. This damsel in distress might be a piece of work, but she wasn't stupid. Looks like his odd behavior had finally caught her attention, but Zhang Yi didn't care. What other people thought didn't matter to him anymore. Nothing, he replied coldly, then tossed his phone aside. On the other end, Fang Yuqing stared at Zhang Yi's curt reply, feeling a knot in her stomach. For the past couple of years, Zhang Yi had been practically worshipping the ground she walked on. Always so thoughtful, always finding excuses to talk to her every night, but recently, he was like a different person, cold and distant, barely speaking to her, never initiating a conversation. It really bothered her. She might not be head over heels for Zhang Yi, but she sure as hell wasn't going to let him lose interest in her. In her mind, it was like a fish trying to escape her pond. Zhang Yi wasn't exactly rolling in dough, but he was a decent catch, a solid middle-class dude. If she couldn't snag a rich heir, she could always give Zhang Yi a shot. Fang Yuqing picked up her phone and texted again. I feel like we've lost touch recently. Makes me feel a little lonely. But she waited, and got no reply. Fang Yuqing bit her lip, feeling annoyed. Damn Zhang Yi, what's gotten into him? I reach out and he can't even be bothered to text back. Her roommate, Li Caning, heard her grumbling and came over, smirking. That Zhang Yi has been acting super weird lately. Who knows why he's buying so much food and booze, ordering all those fancy meals from the hotel. Looks like he knows there's going to be a shortage of everything soon. Fang Yuqing frowned slightly at that. She said to Li Caning, Ningning, do you think something is going to happen soon? Did Zhang Yi hear something and start stocking up? Li Caning stared at her, then burst out laughing, clutching her stomach. Yuqing, are you kidding me? If something like that was going down, we'd get an official warning. We should just chill. If we start hoarding stuff, people will think we're nuts. Fang Yuqing chuckled, a little embarrassed. Good point. Zhang Yi stayed in the hotel suite for days. He didn't go anywhere. He spent his time buying up fancy meals from all the hotels he could find, and in his room, he practiced with his compound bows and crossbows. Luckily, Zhang Yi used to hunt and knew what he was doing. Now, he could hit his mark almost every time within 50 feet, especially with a professional-grade compound bow. Modern equipment could let an ordinary person shoot an arrow just as well as someone from the olden days. Taking out humans was one thing, but he could also do some serious damage to wild boars, jackals, or big dogs.